Top of the hour, Cary Harrison with you, your new best friend, coming to you live right now from Berlin, Germany. How is that possible, you wonder? Well, it is, because I just finished doing a very cool project that I'm going to tell you about, and also let you know that we're going to be talking a bit about Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. Now, I know most of us have seen Star Trek. Not everybody is a fan, but she was something. By now, you've all heard that she has passed. Well, we did the very last ever interview with her before her death, and we recorded it pre-pandemic. And she talks about everything from how she helped NASA for the first time ever allow women in NASA, and how she had met with Dr. Martin Luther King after she tried to quit the show. She'd even already written her resignation letter, even though she was on color TV as a woman of color in the 1960s, before interracial marriage was even legal. This was a groundbreaking woman. So we're going to talk about her. We're going to play that interview for you in just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to talk to a woman who was one of the last people, or the last person, that Nichelle Nichols dealt with, who has an insider story that you won't know, you won't have read about, what was happening at the end that had to do with somebody trying to take her house, and a lot of, well, let's just say, potentially unsavory stuff. So you're going to want to hear that so that you can understand who this star was, what her life meant to everybody, and how people in Hollywood, when they get infirm and old, 89, how people can take advantage of them too. So this is an important conversation to be had. And that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. So I want you to hang on. Make sure you sign up for our free newsletter. Sent out a couple. If you're new to signing up, you won't have received one yet, but I'll be sending one out shortly. And you can simply go to caryharrison.com, caryharrison, caryharrison.com. Sign up for the free, our favorite price, free newsletter, and make sure you're in the loop on everything that's going on right now. So let me tell you what is going on. The reason I'm in Germany right now is because I was in Switzerland yesterday. Why was I there? Well, I was sent away to boarding school when I was 14. I was maybe a naughty boy. Who's to say? Who can remember that far back? And there are no published records. But I went there for 3 years, and it was an extraordinary experience. More about that probably another time. But the director of the school, pre-pandemic, invited me to come by. This is a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and they were doing a model United Nations. What is a model United Nations? Well, these schools in Switzerland are, they attract a bunch of different characters. I was one of those characters. Now they attract a more savory group, let's say, a little more well-heeled and well-behaved. So this school was picked out of all of them in Europe, and this is a neutral country. Let's remember, Switzerland is not Sweden. I'm not saying that to you personally. I'm saying that to people you might know who don't know the difference between Switzerland and Sweden. Let's just pull the map back, since this is audio delivered, though you will see this video simply by going to caryharrison.com or on the KPFK website on my page. You'll see a copy of this video too, so you'll also be able to see our guest, Angelique Fawcett, who'll be coming up to talk about Nichelle Nichols, also known as Lieutenant Uhura. So Switzerland it's the belly button of Europe. So if you look at a map of Europe, you see France, you see Germany, you see Austria, you see Liechtenstein, wherever that is, it's a tiny little place. You see Italy, north, west, east, south. Every one of them touches Switzerland. So it literally is the belly button. And in the middle of Switzerland is the famous Matterhorn, after which Walt Disney fashioned the Matterhorn at Disneyland. And I'm sure the Swiss would love to get royalties on that. In fact, Paramount Pictures actually owes a ton of money, especially after the new Top Gun movie, to Switzerland for stealing the Matterhorn, which is their logo. But there were no trademark issues way back when. So that's the Matterhorn, middle of Switzerland, middle of Europe, belly button of everything. The Nazis did not invade Switzerland, even though what a perfect place to invade, because then you could go to France. You could go all over Europe, piece of cake, just right through the middle. but they didn't because, well, let's say there was a benefit to neutral Switzerland during World War II. That said, it hosts some very, very excellent schools. And this one called Institute Montana, it's a place where John Kerry went, among many others. A friend here in LA who directed World War Z with Brad Pitt, a bunch of other people went there. And this school was picked to hold a literal United Nations like we have in Geneva, but a model United Nations. In other words, a United Nations for students, ages 10 to say 16. Same thing, gavels, coats, ties, Madam Secretary, the whole soup, cat, and pizzas, all the protocols, and a high discipline and a high honor for whatever school gets that particular accolade of hosting this event, hosting students from all over the world. So when I was there back in, I think it was like 2018, 131 countries were represented. So these are students from all over Europe, from all over the world at this Model United Nations. And I'm sweeping in for a little fun here. And I said, well, can I address the Model United Nations? What are you going to talk about? It'll be a surprise. And it was. And I asked them, and this is where KPFK and public radio in general, and I don't mean NPR necessarily, I mean the public radio that you and I know and love, the free speech variety, the non-corporatized public radio. This is where there's this amazing overlap. It occurred to me that if we can do what we do in Los Angeles, which is we can go on the air, we can present issues and topics in a free speech forum without anybody banging down the gavel and providing incredible and toxic censorship and saying, well, you can't say this, you can't say that. In other words, like commercial radio, when I used to do commercial talk radio, even on Sirius XM, which is you can swear, you can cut gaseous borborygms on the air, you can belch, you could do it all. It's fine. But there are certain areas of conversation that maybe the advertisers don't like. So that's how censorship can work. You can self-censor just so you don't cut your own financial throat. Here at this station, there is no financial throat, at least not for me. For the station, yes, so that it can continue to offer a spectrum of free speech. So it occurred to me while addressing this Model United Nations, and I'm just going to do a parenthetical moment here and reintroduce myself because a couple of minutes have passed. People get in and out of their cars. They have no idea who or what they're listening to. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show here on KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles. Coming to you right now from Berlin, Germany, after having just left Switzerland in between Zurich and Lucerne on top of a mountain called the Zugerberg, where for the past 2 weeks, and now we're going to get to it, I have built the first ever radio station and video station, so green screen and audio streaming for students, so the kids between the ages of 10 and 16 can have their voices heard. Now, voices heard about issues that matter to them, like climate change, which doesn't exist in the United States, apparently. Wildfires, well, it's just an oops. The Grand Canyon, the Colorado River having gone down in Lake Mead to 23% from 100%, where the intake valves are poking out of the water and barrels are emerging with dead bodies, thanks to early Las Vegas and the Frank Sinatra era. It's happening all over the world. Ski resorts are becoming hiking trails. We don't see snow in places that used to have snow. You and I know, you and I, talking to each other right now, listening to each other right now, know how real climate change is. But it's not discussed because it is forbidden. It is forbidden. You don't really hear it discussed on NBC Nightly News, on CBS, CNN sort of mentions it, and they do it to sound cool and hip, but they don't actually sit and hammer on it because sponsors will pull out. And who are the sponsors? Petroleum companies. NPR, National Petroleum Company, also known as National Public Radio. PBS, the Petroleum Broadcasting Service. And I say this with a big smile on my face and a lot of fun, but in fact, and alas, it is a fact in the United States. We've been idiotized, turned into nitwits, unsure of anything. We're unsure of gravity again. The Scopes monkey trial could happen again today in Tennessee, and we don't know. We don't know anything anymore because there's no real confirmation. We don't have a Walter Cronkite in the mass media anymore. We have nothing. We just have maybe Anderson Cooper keeping them honest. Who are they? How many of them have been kept honest? Has anyone been keeping a track or score? Is there a tally for such a thing? So it really is silliness and nonsense, regrettably. That said, I've created, based on the KPFK model, the first ever live streaming model of a radio station of these young voices from a neutral country. And it's also politically agnostic. They may have a political bent that would come out in some way or another, but it's not a political organ like Fox News. It's not a political organ as occasionally KPFK may feel, because we tend to like the humans versus the corporations. But that's not the goal and the mission here. It's to get out issues that matter to the kids who are stuck on this planet for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 more years. Skin in the game like nobody's business. So all of this nonsense and this mass media that we have and all this Kardashianisming and selfies and hanging out at the Abbey in West Hollywood and being hip and cool and all of that means death for the human race at the speed of light. We need the honesty. We need the truth. We need the truth from people who are, and let me tell you, when I was teaching them, part of what I do is media coaching. Now I'm an international media coach, woohoo, with people from Saudi Arabia. We did the first ever interview from kids with two Ukrainian girls and 2 Russian boys, talking about what is going on, what does this war mean to them, and who are they to each other. And of course, you find out exactly what you would predict, that they're all Slavic brothers and sisters, that the war is about power and oil and this and that. And this is the thinking of a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old. They are so profoundly enlightened. I was blown away. They could tell you what kind of chemicals are in plastic bottles. They know it all, because unlike many of us, you and me, who, at least I speak for myself, when I grew up, there was something called, as if you've never heard of it, the Encyclopedia Britannica. If it was important, if you needed to know about it, it was published in there. If it was not relevant, not important, you didn't need to know about it. It was not in the Encyclopedia Britannica, and therefore it was not taught, it was not discussed, it never happened. So the entire scope of human history was limited to a series of books. And if somebody didn't come by and sell you those books, you didn't know. So that was the official history, the official knowledge lexicon, were these encyclopedias, whether they were the English version, the British version, the American one, it doesn't really matter. Just like the dictionary. If it's not a real word, it's not in the dictionary. And we find that that's not true. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. You can follow us anytime across all social media at Cary Harrison. You can also go to caryharrison.com, where you'll see a copy of the streaming video, not right now, but after we're done, along with the entire interview with Nichelle Nichols, the late Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, groundbreaking African-American woman. Groundbreaking. Put women in NASA, changed everything because of her relationship with Dr. Martin Luther King. Plus, we'll be talking to Angelique Fawcett, who is one of the last people to talk with her, who's going to tell us an inside story that you won't know about. And that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. We're going to be hearing that interview in, I would say, about 3 minutes. But let me just button up what I'm talking about. And I know some of you are saying, well, but why don't you button up your mouth? Well, that's kind of the point of free speech. We don't all love everything that's out there, but if we stop certain things that get out there, then we end up with Fox News or MSNBC. And I don't know that you who's listening, who's hanging out with me right now, love either one of them. They're both kind of a one-trick pony here. So we put this streaming radio station in Switzerland, in a neutral country, run, operated, and hosted by these young voices, did this interview back and forth between 2 Russians, 2 Ukrainian children, talking about the reality of it, finding out they see each other simply as Slavic brothers and sisters. They know they share the same DNA. They even know what DNA is. They can even count the strands. Let me tell you, it's powerful and important. These people are going to save our ass. They are going to save the world. They have skin in the game. They're smart. They're intelligent. Their voices are not welcome anywhere because they ask the questions that are uncomfortable, that are awkward, that put people on the spot. How delicious is that? So we got a lot of media all over the European press in German language. We got some in English, and I will post that on my website at caryharrison.com, also on KPFK. You can use your translation in your browser if you Google Chrome or any of them. It'll translate it from German or any of the other languages into English. So you could see what we're doing based on my experience at KPFK, based on falling in love with this radio station that has done so much, changed my life, changed your life. And we magnificently adore it. And if we can clone it in any way we can, replicate the model, especially for young voices, they can keep this station continuing and operating on the air, which is great. We kind of forget about that. You know, it's like, well, the old guard will just keep pushing. Well, let's bring in the young guard now. Let's bring them in and let them take that baton and run with it. So that's what I say. Now, before waiting any longer, because we do have a guest upcoming, you all know about Lieutenant Uhura. I'm just resetting because in the very beginning, some of you may have already arrived at your destination, gotten out of your car, new people have gotten in. The Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, not everyone is a great Star Trek fan, but many, many, many of us are. At least we respect it. Gene Roddenberry, a name that I think most of us have heard of by now, the inventor, the creator of Star Trek. I met him when I was in college, and he came to speak, and he was doing the speaker circuit at that time. And I knew him because I grew up watching Star Trek, and I loved it. There was no Star Wars yet, not until, what was it, 1978? So when I was watching Star Trek, when I was in college, there was everything already, obviously. But there was Star Trek when I was a tiny little kid, and I wasn't allowed to stay up and watch it. Therefore, I stayed up and watched it. Some of you could relate. So who was Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek? And we're talking about the most radical TV show probably ever put on the boob tube, ever. So 1965, 1966, imagine, first of all, it was in color. And it had a person of color, in color, as an officer on the bridge of a battleship, a starship. So you had Captain Kirk, famous. You had Mr. Sulu, George Takei, who we've had on this show many times, who's a wonderful guy. A great progressive, an open-minded guy who now talks a lot about having been interned in the Japanese concentration camps in California as a kid. It took many years for him to be able to talk about that. He's now doing a one-man show. A lot of the cast of Star Trek are all very enlightened people, as was Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura. So Gene Roddenberry creates a show during the height of the Cold War. I think the Cold War was still going to percolate a lot more. So this is like the super duper peak. This is around after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we all almost died. And then there was the issue of what was going on in East and West Germany. So Gene Roddenberry creates a show called Star Trek. And on the bridge of this battleship, you have a Russian, Chekhov. You have a Scotsman, Scotty. You have Captain Kirk, who's actually Canadian. You have Mr. Spock, who's really Israeli. So the whole Vulcan thing with the famous hand motion of splitting your fingers apart is Hebrew. And so he represented the Jewish people. You had then Lieutenant Uhura, an African-American woman in color on color television as an officer. And before that time, you saw African-American women as cleaning ladies. That's it, or as mammies. And here she was in charge of stuff. Now, was Gene Roddenberry a pussy? Was he a washcloth? Was he a weakling? Was he some kind of like feel-good limousine liberal? No. Gene Roddenberry fought in World War II and flew 89 combat mission in the Army Air Forces. So he was a pilot. And of course, this is a Starship outer space, way before we would go to outer space. 89 missions in the Army Air Forces during World War II, then worked as a commercial pilot after the war, then joined the LAPD and became a cop, and then had some kind of epiphany and created a, what's the word that we like to say, a utopia of sorts, where in the future, all countries are now working together. So we had the communists and Russians. In Russia, we had this, we had that, the Middle East, the Asians, blah, 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 all working together for the purpose of peace in the world. And if you do like Star Trek, and you are a Star Trek fan of some sort, you'll know about the Prime Directive, made popular there, which was, among all else, sort of the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. Don't leave a footprint where it can destroy somebody else's culture. A lot of the technology that you and I know today comes from that show. Scanners, medical scanners, all this stuff is pretty normal now, just like in the movie with Tom Cruise called, and I'm spacing out because I'm thinking of Maverick, but the sci-fi one where you're sweeping your hand across the air on computer screens. You got that now at home. Everyone does. So that's Gene Roddenberry, a rough and tumble 89 mission World War II pilot, bomber pilot, who has this epiphany, wakes up and decides to create utopia during a time when interracial marriage was not yet legal, when you didn't have Black people on TV as military leaders, commanders, officers. You didn't have it. He puts commies on there, all of it. The whole soup, cat, and pizza's all mixed up in a can't we all just get along with a kick-ass, phasers and photon torpedoes and Klingons and all the other stuff you know. That's who he was. And he cast this woman, a woman who was discovered partially by Hugh Hefner and made her a Playboy bunny in Chicago. And this beautiful Black woman, well, he decided to throw her on the bridge of the Enterprise. Can you imagine the shock? And she's going to tell you in her own words about a lot of the hate mail she got from the Deep South and how she was done. Handed in her resignation. Gene Roddenberry tore up her resignation, and Dr. King told her to come back. That she was an example never before seen in all of human history in the United States and the rest of the world, and doing the first interracial kiss. So this is the last ever interview with her. Radio interview, TV interview. We videotaped it too. We'll be able to post that video short. It's never been seen before. The audio has been played a couple of years ago, but we're going to play it again for you for the first time right now. An interview with Nichelle Nichols of Star Trek, who played Lieutenant Uhura, her last recorded interview as she has now passed. Here it is. I know I speak for millions when I say it is an absolute treat to meet you, Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. Most of us grew up with you in our living room, one way or the other, whether it was live or in reruns. You helped us define the absolute clear difference between good and bad. There was always a moral essence to what you did and what your show did. And we're so thrilled to be able to talk to you today in this exclusive one-on-one.
Thank you. There's nobody better than the fans of Star Trek, They really know what they're talking about and what we're talking about to them, what the show is about.
In the 1960s, we had the Voting Rights Act just rolling out.
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry, who people may not know, but this guy was not a washcloth. He was a World War II bomber pilot.
Absolutely.
And he was one of those cool guys who went back to see what happens when you do this bombing.
Yeah.
And had this enlightenment that peace is really the better choice.
Yes.
And made this obviously very radical choice. We're in the middle of a Cold War, and he puts a communist, he puts an African American, he puts a Japanese guy, Hebrew, Mr.
One
Spock.
of all of us.
That's right. One of all in outer space
Yeah.
as officers. So
Yeah.
not only were you a woman, a Black woman and an officer
Mhm.
in 1965 in color.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, it was a wow. People, they came down and would stand outside if they couldn't get in, just to wait till we came out to shake our hands and to tell us how wonderful our show was, or how much they appreciated what we were doing, you know. And a person specifically, they would tell you what you're up to. Yeah, I agree. And it was wonderful. Yeah.
And you are a pioneer, really, of much of the women's movement, a voice for the African American world. We're talking planet Earth, of which we now have 7 billion humans. And you were very much the template for how we get to look at ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was wonderful to be that person too, you know, to be chosen to live that life, you know, and to represent not only your own personal people like you, but people who aren't like you. And we had that kind of following. There wasn't a matter of black, white, yellow, brown, or green. You know, it was us, you, me, you, me, you, me, you know.
I understand that Dr. Martin Luther King would talk to you here and there because it wasn't always very comfortable for you. I mean, you were kind of alone on TV. It wasn't like there were other people in prime time, in living color on NBC. I'm saying MSNBC, you know what I watch. And he came to you and I think probably coached you to stay the course, right?
Yep. As a matter of fact, you really got that, because I was going to leave the show. He said to me, "You can't. Don't you know who you are? What you mean to people? You can't go." When he got through, I couldn't go. Even though when you first start out on it, you think nobody's going to care. Everybody cares, because you're representing them. You're talking to, like we're talking to one another. You're talking a person to person about something very important to the world, you know, who we are and what we're doing. And it makes a difference.
Well, speaking of making a difference, other than the fact that I'm starstruck, and I've talked to a lot of people, but
I'm delighted.
good. You had the first in human history that we know of interracial kiss on television.
Yes.
Game changing.
Yes. Yes. But so did my family. Truly.
When you were handed the script, you may not have thought of it as an interracial kiss, but when it's on TV, I mean, it was clearly planned.
The first interracial kiss on television anywhere. And I said, "It is? Oh, that's interesting." And I didn't think of it as that, wow, you know, but people kept coming up to me and are relating in the conversation how incredible that was. And I'm going, "It is," you know? And, but in my family, it just simply wasn't, because I come from a widely interracial family. So if you realize you're different, you know, it plays with your mind. You know, how different from what? I'm no different from anybody else. They're no different from me. And then my family, there's everybody in the world. You know, black, white, yellow, brown, and red. And I'm not joking, you know. So it didn't seem strange to me in any way to be out in the world.
The White House today and the whole sort of interesting political structure. We're like back in these basic struggles once again.
We'll be out of them before you know it, because we don't put up with that. We don't live that life, and life has to move out of the way for everyone. And that's just the way it is. Like it or not, that's the way it is. Yeah, life is for everybody.
Your favorite Star Trek episode?
Anytime I get off the bridge. They had me locked on that bridge. I had this really responsible job. I never got off the damn bridge. So I went and I told them, and I think there was an episode when they did something about my life off the bridge, you know. And I went, oh, that was interesting, but I do that every day. Let me get back on the bridge. I love the show, and I love being part of it.
You must experience many times, we all know you, but you don't know us. Like we walk up to you like, well, hey, let's.
I know you. I know you. I know every last one of you out there. Because I'm part of you. You're part of me. I know. Live long and prosper.
Star Trek's Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura, joined us as she has yet another birthday in her 80s after celebrating more than a half century in the Star Trek franchise and raising multiple generations through her sweet spirit and gentle nature. Cary Harrison with you. This is Reality Check Live. Cary Harrison with you. That was a recorded interview of Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, from a few years ago. She just passed away at 89. I think everybody knows that by now. A true inspiration to so many people, generations of people, as a matter of fact, and a crusader for civil rights with quite a story about it. I detailed that earlier on. Suffice to say that, you want to quit and go to Broadway. Dr. Martin Luther King says, what you're doing is really important. And you decide to stick with it because it's really important. And we have lost her, but we have not lost her spirit, and we have not lost her legacy. One of the people who continues that legacy in many ways is our guest who's hanging on right now, Angelique Fawcett. And Angelique is the CEO of Archangel Films, LA, a filmmaker, producer, nationwide public elder abuse activist, and the founder of #FreeNichelle, as in Nichelle Nichols, as in Lieutenant Uhura. You're wondering, what does that mean? Well, we're going to get into that because, you could be a popular celebrity, you can be an amazing human being, but sometimes when you get older, things can happen. And just like they would in Florida or Arkansas or Arizona, they can also happen in Hollywood. And we're going to find out what that is. She's also a previous #Free Britney event organizer and the Freedom Rallies. She's also on the board of KSIM Cares, an organization in which fights to prevent elder abuse across our nation. You can go to, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, ksimcares.org. You can nod if I am. Yes, good for me. That's KASEM cares.org. She's a wife and a friend. And Nichelle and Angelique were very close, like a mother and daughter in so many ways. And the backstory here, as we talk about Lieutenant Uhura or Nichelle Nichols, who has recently passed, I want to introduce you to Angelique Fawcett, who did so much in the later years to help Nichelle, and also introduce a story that you won't have heard about. Angelique, thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is a difficult time, just days after the passing of really your best friend and Erzat's mother. And I think maybe you're muted if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. It's, thank you. Sorry about that. It's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. And I talked to you because the last time I was with you, I was with Nichelle. And she was on your show and we had such a great day that day. And I remember you giving her some transcripts of Martin Luther King's that you had found. And I just want to thank you for being so kind to her and loving her so much. She just really had such a wonderful time with you. So thank you. Um, I don't know where you'd like me to start.
Well,
Kasem Cares was founded by Cary Kasem, who is Casey Kasem's daughter. As you know, Casey Kasem also suffered elder abuse and was stuck in an abusive conservatorship to his death. Nichelle has just been like a mother to me, and I have fought for human and civil rights for all of these years. I did exactly what she said. I stood up for her when she needed it. So
let's jump into that, because even though this is such an intimate and obvious situation that you're an expert in ways you never would have invited, wanted, wished, or anything like that. But I would say probably most people have no idea that this even happened. They just assume Hollywood star got old, passed away, end of story. But there's a huge backstory about, even if you're loved by the people of Earth, as Nichelle was. I mean, talk about a recognizable person, but then there's something that goes on behind, even, particularly involving her own children.
yes. Well, what happened to Nichelle is that, of course, Nichelle was beautiful, and it's so hard to say that she was, but she was, a beautiful, wonderful human being. She was not the conceited, what people would say a conceited celebrity is. She would stop for every fan. She would take every picture. She'd sign every autograph. And she loved her life. She knew where her bread was buttered. She loved Star Trek. And she always knew that that would be a part of her life. Star Trek created the life that she wanted. She was able to buy a beautiful property, a garden estate in which she planted trees and roses and everything that she loved. It's where she wanted to live and die. So back in 2013, and I want to preface it with this, is that, most people say, oh, well, you shouldn't talk about these things. You shouldn't speak the truth, because the American public has a certain thought pattern as to when people die. But if we don't speak about these issues, this is going to continue to happen to other elderly and other incapacitated adults. So you're one of the first people I've spoken to, and it's hard because, you spend your days crying and trying to push down everything. So in 2013,
I'm just going to jump in a second and reintroduce you so that people are on board with who we're listening to. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. You can get a copy of this video. You can watch it on KPFK on our the Cary Harrison Show homepage. You can also go to caryharrison.com. We're talking right now to Angelique Fawcett. She's the CEO of Archangel Films, LA, a producer, nationwide public elder abuse activist, and turns out to have been the sort of heart daughter of Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, and witnessed and advocated directly for Nichelle Nichols in her later years when her own children were on the grift, you might say. And you're about to tell us about that, Angelique, because, a star that we all loved so well. This is probably not atypical for a lot of older people in the world, famous or not. Tell us the story. What happened?
So in 2013, Nichelle became sick with pancreatitis. There's a lot of people who suffer from pancreatitis. She went to the hospital. She spent some days in the hospital. She almost died there. The press didn't know it. Her fans didn't know it. But my husband and I personally watched as her family, as well as her talent manager, left the hospital while Nichelle was gasping for breath. She was sweating and reaching for her ancestors. She was dying. We stayed with her the entire night until about 6:30 in the morning, until things got better for her and things were looking better for her. But it was very shocking that her family and friends would leave. It was very shocking because at that time, Nichelle, Steve and I, Steve is my husband, we were new friends to her. And then after she got out of the hospital, she was placed in a rest home. A lot of people don't know that. And she was crying in the rest home, tears rolling down her face. And you know her. Tears are flowing down her face. I'm not talking about just little tears. Please.
I think, Angelique, your mic just dropped down. Maybe there's
Oh, am I back?
There we go. You're back. I'm in Berlin, Germany, by the way.
I know you're far.
Just so we can appreciate the distance here and how the technology, when it works, it's great. And now you're working and you are great. And you're talking about your husband and Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura, who's recently passed some years ago in the hospital with pancreatitis. And you spent the night there. And then that morning, something started to get revealed.
She got better. She was placed in a rest home and she was crying every day. Tears were rolling down her face. She said, please get me out of here. And I told her, Nichelle, I can't do anything because I'm not blood. And I went to go check with the doctor because I told her, look, let me check and see what's really going on. She thought that her son was going to place her in a rest home permanently in 2013. I went around the corner. I actually spoke to her doctor and her doctor confirmed that her son was going to place her in a rest home permanently in 2013. To move the story along, Nichelle escaped the rest home. She got better. We had a talk about muscles and dancing and, to get her legs back going as strong as they could be. And she did. She escaped the rest home with the help of her then talent manager. She got a power of attorney. I was a second on her power of attorney. And she asked me and my husband to make a video of her that night, stating what she wants in her final years. You can find that video on YouTube. It's called Nichelle's Own Words. And she states very clearly, and I don't even repeat it because I want people to see for themselves. Listen to my friend's words herself, what she wanted for her life. I want people to hear it. Because I may not have been able to save her. I may not have been able to free her, but please, whoever is listening or watching, listen to her words, understand what she is saying, because I can guarantee you do not want to be stuck in an abusive conservatorship or guardianship at all. So subsequently, what ended up happening is that her son did not visit her for 6 years after she escaped the rest home. She went on with her life and filmed TV. She filmed film. She won awards. She was nominated for an Emmy. So if she was placed in a rest home permanently in 2013, none of that would have happened. All the beautiful life that she had to go out and do what she loved, because she loved acting. She loved being in front of the public. And she's older. She earned it. That was hers. You'll hear that in Nichelle's own words. Star Trek was hers to have. She also said, I'm as old as I think, and I think powerfully. And Nichelle thought powerfully. After after this whole 6 years, her son would not visit her on Christmas or Thanksgiving or Mother's Day or any of the holidays that were special, her birthday. I had to beg her family, I had to beg some other people to come to her birthday parties. My husband and I started getting her a Christmas tree every year and celebrating every year except for one, when she had to travel. But I think it's very telling when you have relatives like that they know that something's going on, because at the time there was issues with the ex-talent manager. There were items missing off of her walls when I'd come over. There was a huge bookshelf of film that Gene Roddenberry had given to her, gone. On her 85th birthday party, her whole closet was gone. I had to buy her new clothes so she could stay warm and comfortable on her trips and going to conventions. It was just so horrific. Bills weren't being paid. So this family, they fight back and forth. Instead of caring about Nichelle's needs and Nichelle's wants and her desires, they just kept fighting back and forth, from the talent manager to the family, going back and forth. What about Nichelle? What did she want? What about her desires? All she asked me to do is stand up for her, have her back, make sure that she's able to live and die in her home in Woodland Hills, California, that she can visit her fans and work. I went to court and became an interested party, and I fought for her rights as such. I had to fight against her family. I didn't want to fight against her family. You don't want to fight against someone's family. But when you have to, when you've made a promise to a friend, Nichelle wasn't my mother, but she was my second mother. You know, I have my own beliefs, and, you know, she must have done this for me in another lifetime. And so now I've lost my soulmate, who was, you know, you have your friend's soulmates and you have your husband's soulmates and or wife soulmates. And, you know, she died imprisoned and silenced. And I think that's the worst part for me, is that I don't know if she was alone. I don't know if she was in pain. I don't know how battered she was. There were so many abuse videos and audios that came out. And then the other side, the team, every time I would share videos, even if you go look now, they've subdued all of the news stories across the nation that share about it. So it's just, it's really hard, because I don't know. I don't know the manner in which she passed, and I wanted to get her back, and I wanted to give her, you know, a rose garden again. I have a nice home, you know, had a room ready for her, a 4-bedroom home, and she could have a rose garden and some grass and some life. She could go to the beach when she wanted to. She could go get her nails done, and she could live a life that she wanted to, but she was not allowed that. There is a judge in court. Her name is Judge Anna Maria Luna. She's actually the judge who's responsible for allowing Nichelle to be moved to New Mexico with her abuser without opening the evidence of the abuse that her son inflicted upon her. And she allowed, when I fought, to open up the finances for Nichelle so people could see what really happened with the money, so the court could see. She granted me the hearing, then she denied it on the day of. So tell me why in the financial documents, and don't quote me on this because I forgot the exact amount. It was a very low amount of money they were paying per year for her food alone. They were proud of it. It comes out to maybe $8, $9 per day.
It's paltry and appalling, to be sure. I'm just going to reintroduce you right now. We're talking to Angelique Fawcett, CEO of Archangel Films, the second daughter, or really the daughter, in many ways, and certainly the second mother to Angelique was Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, who recently passed. And Angelique has spent years advocating and fighting for Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura, who's loved, beloved, known by so many people on the entire planet. All of her films, TV shows, and syndication translated into multiple languages, multiple countries. A woman, Nichelle Nichols, who wouldn't have never heard a fly, not to anybody's knowledge, helped put women in space in NASA, game-changing in the 1960s before interracial marriage was even allowed. We could go on and should go on forever and ever, but just to honor the exceptional visit here of Angelique Fawcett, who's talking about the backstory of how a diminished life of a major celebrity loved by so many, if the world had known, and much of these news stories had not been suppressed, people might have found a way to stand up, but you can't stand up for something if you don't know about it. And I think that's part of what the judge made sure happened, is that people didn't know, because if it's not a thing, you can't really talk about it, you can't defend it, and you're up against a wall, especially in family court. Those judges can be just ruthless because they don't want to have that headache either.
Yes.
So what was your last experience with Nichelle Nichols, Angelique Fawcett, Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura? I keep saying that because people half listen, just nowadays. What was your last experience like with her?
It was beautiful, and I'll never forget it. She said she loved me more than 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 more. And I told her I loved her more than more than more than more. And we were departing. And I signed an NDA at one point. I speak about things because the NDA was broken once Nichelle's son abused her. You know, I don't. There is no crime that someone commits that's going to hold. No NDA is going to hold me down, right? So I was leaving, and he was upset that she was so loving towards me. But my experience was we sat, we talked, and we had our good time like we always do. I was granted court visitations, and we left in love. We left in love, you know. And that's how we always left each other. And the greatest thing about that is that no matter how isolated Nichelle was from her friends, the one thing that he could not do, she only has one son. The one thing that he could not do is that he could not steal her heart away from any of us. There's a few of us that have fought for her. I just might be the one who's more vocal, right? And her spirit was always with me. Her spirit still fills with me. But it's that love and friendship, you can never take it away. I'll see her in another lifetime. You know, the galaxies are real, and you know, I believe I will see her again. And it was a very loving goodbye, but I didn't know that it would be my last time. I didn't know that.
When was this, Angelique Fawcett?
2019. I think it was May 2019. Might have been May 15th, 2019, if I have the right day.
Let me touch point on the relevancy of having you on. And this, as you said, is really your sort of first public interview about this topic. You were the one that brought us Nichelle Nichols back when we launched a new show a few years ago. And you and she showed up at our launch party in West Hollywood. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in the world, but when Lieutenant Uhura shows up at my party, let me tell you, that's some bragging rights. And then you brought her over to KPFK, to the radio station, and we did this last interview with her, and we videotaped it. And then we were able, it was a surprise, but we had discovered some Dr. Martin Luther King tapes that were, you know, sitting with 3 inches of dust on them, and walked her into what we call the vault, which is a giant air-conditioned room. And for those of you who are KPFK listeners and Pacifica fans, we have really the world's archives. When recordings were made possible, we started recording. So we really have many of these amazing archives. And we have this trove of Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches and conversations. And we took her in there and showed her everything. And it was so moving to watch her watch us watching her watch tapes. Like they're not videotapes, they're like reel-to-reel clunky tapes. And then as we walked out, there's a fish tank up in the archives. And what is sitting at the bottom of the fish tank, surrounded by guppies and neon tetras? Well, there's a little tiny Enterprise at the bottom squirting bubbles. And she points at it and says, "Look." And it was just a really beautiful moment. And you made that possible for us. And there was so much buoyancy and joy, because this was a moment that she was not going to get to relive. And it certainly wasn't for us. And being able to play that audio, as we did a half hour ago, with her talking about everything that mattered to her. And then you here now talking about what an amazing person she was, and also revealing how difficult it can be when people get old. If nobody's looking over them before things get bad, then things get bad.
And may I just mention, you know, you talk about the big bubble and the Enterprise. I'd like to talk a little bit briefly about dementia and Alzheimer's. These are things that happen to our elderly. In the past, the elderly were our leaders. Go back in history, and we went to the old wise men and the old wise women for direction. When you talk about the enterprise that she saw as a little enterprise, in 2013, she was wrongfully diagnosed with dementia. She really started having some memory issues in 2017. It comes. But let's talk about dementia and Alzheimer's for a minute. If you plan ahead of time for your life, for what you want, before you get dementia or Alzheimer's, you have any kind of sickness, isn't it your right to be able to get what you planned for then, now? Say you have dementia right now. Dementia and Alzheimer's that falls under disability rights in the United States of America. It means you have a disability. It doesn't mean that you are now invalid. You're going to quote unquote die anyway. So what does it matter? It doesn't mean that you are no longer a human being. You are just as strong and just as viable as you ever have been before. And even if people with dementia and Alzheimer's can't speak to you the way they used to, it doesn't mean that they're not still in there, that they don't still feel, that they don't still know. That little enterprise, if she had such bad dementia, would she been able to spot that in your office?
Not the size. It's,
not its size. It's so small. And so we had many nights, we'd spend the night together and watch TV, and we'd talk and talk and talk and talk. And we made crazy little dinners and things like that. But that's when she was the most clear, when she didn't have stress. She wasn't running to an event or anything like that. When she didn't have stress, she was just home. You would think she was just like regular. But her dementia was like that of a grandma's.
I have to jump in because regrettably we are out of time. It breaks my heart because this is, celebrating her life and also getting out the reality of it. And the lesson that you're teaching us at the same time is it's so important because all of us are going to ripen, and we need to have some plans and make sure those plans are honored. And I want to thank you today for joining us. We've been talking to Angelique Fawcett, CEO of Archangel Films LA, filmmaker, producer, nationwide public elder abuse activist, the founder of #FreeNichelle and a previous #FreeBritney event organizer, the Freedom Rallies too. She's also on the board of KSM Cares, an organization which fights to prevent elder abuse across our nation. KSMCares.org. That's Kasem with a K, as in Casey Kasem, named after him. Cary Harrison with you. This is a tribute to Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura. Make sure you re-listen to this. If you're just catching it now, you're going to hear an interview that was among her last, if not the last, commercial or public interview that we did that's airing. And then you're going to hear the backstory of what happened. I want to thank you again, Angelique Fawcett. Thank you so much for joining us today. And our hearts are with you for real.
Thank you. I love you. It's so wonderful speaking with you. And thank you all for caring about Nichelle so much.
And we will make sure to post links of the videos that you recommended that are eyewitness reports of what you're talking about to flesh out this whole story and make it real. And it will help people for sure. You can go to caryharrison.com. You can see this video. You can also go to kpfk.org, my page on there. Cary Harrison Show, and you'll be able to see this and everything else. Again, thank you so much, Angelique Fawcett, and
thank you.
My love to Lieutenant Uhura, who I grew up with, who was in a sense a mother to me too, showing me good behavior, responsibility, and accountability, and taking care of the star system that someday I will inhabit in my own way as I get sent up there too. Thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you all next week.